Hi, welcome to this special fireside chat entitled Staging Queerness Through the Generations, a collaboration between New York Theater Workshop and National Queer Theater.
National Queer Theater celebrates its second year of producing social justice work by and for a global LGBTQIA+ community, now producing the Criminal Queerness Festival online with Dixon Place and the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs.
My name is Gaven Trinidad, he, him, his, Community Engagement Associate at New York Theater Workshop.
My name is Schwartz, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Community Programs Coordinator at National Queer Theater.
We also would like to introduce to you all our wonderful ASL interpreter and multi-hyphenated theater maker, Brandon Kazen-Maddox. Before we go on and introduce our wonderful artists, we just want to take a moment to hold up the tremendous first line work that is happening right now for Black Lives Matter and for greater accountability across society, from the police to our own theatrical institutions. At this moment, we'd like to highlight some organizations in our community who are on the ground right now fighting for Black lives, Black trans lives, and social justice. If you can make a donation, please do. And if not, we encourage you to join us in action through healing, education, protest, petition, or other support. Pride is protest. And let's not forget, the Stonewall riots were started by our queer and trans Black and brown family. We will be posting resources into the chat box.
Just some housekeeping before we start. This conversation will last around an hour. For the first 40 minutes, we will kiki with our panelists, then we'll open it up to a Q&A. If you have technical or logistical questions about the platform, please share via the Q&A tab on Zoom or comment via Facebook. When we get to the Q&A portion, feel free to share your questions for panelists via the same mechanism. If you're on Zoom and someone asks a question that you're interested in, you can vote it in by clicking the thumbs up on your Facebook, and you can use the like feature as well on Facebook. We'll do our best to get to all of the questions that we can in the time that we have. And you know, we're here today to have an open intergenerational conversation about what it is / what it was like to create theater pieces about LGBTQIA+ communities in the past, present, and future. We want to understand the impact that queer theater can have on one's artistry and their activism today. We're so fortunate to have different LGBTQIA+ artists of different backgrounds here today, and to hear more about how they're building on the canon of queer performance.
And so if you're looking for the full bios of our artists today, they can be found on our social media channels and on our website. And first, I would love to introduce André De Shields, a theater professional with a career spanning more than 50 years. He is the Triple Crown winner of the 2019 awards season, having won the Outer Critics, Folk Circle, Drama Desk, and Tony Awards for the Best Featured Actor in a Musical for his critically acclaimed performance as Hermes in Hades' Town. Welcome.
How you doing out there?
Hello.
André De Shields, yes indeed. My pronouns are king.
Oh.
He, him, his. Thank you very much.
I would also love to introduce Leigh Fondakowski. Leigh is a lauded playwright, author, and teacher. Leigh was the head writer of the Laramie Project, co-writer of Laramie 10 years later, and an Emmy-nominated co-screenwriter for the film adaptation of Laramie with HBO Films. And Leigh is a current board member of National Queer Theater. Welcome, Leigh.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Next up on our panel is J Haddad, who is an actor, playwright, and autobiographical performer based in New York. Ryan has a recurring role on one of my favorite shows, The Politician, and is a recipient of playwriting awards, including the IAMA Theater Company's Shonda Rhimes Unsung Voices Playwriting Commission and Rising Phoenix Rep's Cornelia Street American Playwriting Award. And last, but by no means the least, is L. Morgan Lee, who is a New York City-based actress. Her performance this past season in the Pulitzer Prize-winning musical A Strange Loop garnered her a Lucille Lortel Award nomination for Outstanding Featured Actress in a Musical. She is also nominated for an Antonio Award for Best Featured Actor in A Strange Loop.
Welcome, welcome, everyone.
It's good to be here. Yeah.
We're very excited. As Bree and I were trying to think of questions we had to ask questions about our own encounter with queer theater, queer role models and images and things that we've just grown up with. And so we wanted to extend that to you to also acknowledge, you know, queer theater is not necessarily always a perceived space. I grew up in the East Village. So my queer performance that I was introduced to were the Radical Fairies in Tompkins Square Park. But if we are talking about in the American theater, in quotes, I guess my first time interacting with queer characters was Rent at the Nederlander Theater.
Yeah, and being a little bit younger than Gaven, my first experience was also Rent at New World Stages. So that was, yeah, but we're interested to hear, what were your first experiences?
I'll jump in. My first experience was actually one that was not considered professional, was in high school. And it was a play called It's Our Town Too, which was a one-act by Susan Miller, based around the same structure as Our Town, but all of the characters were now queer, and there was an audience member who challenged their existence in the play. Considering when I was in high school, which I won't talk about here, that was very progressive. And then after that, my professional experience with queerness would have also been Rent. However, it was the Broadway version.
I'd like to take, oh, sorry.
No, please, you. Oh, go, please.
I want to make the best use of my time on the panel. And I'd like to mention a most significant example of queer theater that happened this week.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the historic opinion handed down by the Supreme Court that included the LGB and all of the other letters in the acronym among those people who are protected in employment against prejudice under Title VII on the federal level. And the majority opinion was written by Justice Gorsuch, which might surprise you. So that's the queer theater of the week.
Mm-hmm.
My initial introduction to queer theater didn't happen until I came to New York. As a member of this intergenerational panel, I think it's important to talk slightly, a little bit, about the etymology of the word gay, which is previous to this moment in history, we all were sort of dumped into that one, or defined by that one category. I always, as a young man, had problems with that term, even though apparently it comes to us as early as the 12th century, but it meant things like carefree and cavalier and merry, M-E-R-R-Y, that kind of merry. And never in my young life did I feel carefree. So I didn't adopt that term. Then 50 years later, I discovered the term queer, which is much more inclusive, I think, because not only can your sexuality be queer, but your politics can be queer. And you could look at something in nature and say, oh, isn't that queer? Or you can hear a curious statement and you could ponder it and say, oh, that's queer. So even my associates who do not consider themselves gay or any other description don't mind being called queer. So there you have it. I came to New York in 1973, and my first artistic home was Ellen Stewart's La Mama down on East 4th Street. And after being summarily dismissed from my first Broadway show, she invited me to come and be one of her performers, in which I performed in the nude as the first man Adam, who loved more than Eve, loved other than Eve. So there.
Love it.
I have two, and brief. The first professional that I can recall, I'm sure that there were others, but the one that is sticking out was the original cast of Spring Awakening. My uncle took me to see it because he knew that there was this, 2-second moment where these gay men kissed on stage, and I was a year away from coming out, and he was like, maybe this will be the push, and it wasn't quite. But then the week that I did come out, I was at a musical theater camp at a local university here in Ohio, and they were doing scenes, and two people who were not me were doing Harper and Joe from Angels in America. And I kept hearing them rehearse it over and over and over and over and over. And I had never seen that play or the film. And I was like, I think this is it. And I got home from the camp and I came out to my parents the next day.
I love hearing all of these stories. I came to New York in the middle 90s, and my first introduction to queer theater was Mr. David Drake in The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me, his solo show on Christopher Street. And it touched my heart in such a way that nothing before that had ever touched my heart on the stage. And I saw a vision from my life that was not there before watching that solo show, that you could articulate queer experience, use the theater as a way of expressing that part of yourself. I was so deeply in the closet and just barely out of the closet when I came to New York. And so just the inhibitions that I had and the fear and the internalized homophobia, and to see David on stage just expressing himself with such freedom and craft, it really made a very strong impression on me. And with Larry Kramer's the recent passing, I saw a post David posted about, posted a picture of him together with Larry Kramer, and it brought to mind another very potent experience from the recent past of seeing The Normal Heart on Broadway and being absolutely stunned by the last moment of the piece where they put all the names on the theater walls of all the people who had died of AIDS. And when I stepped out of the theater, Larry Kramer was there putting out flyers saying the crisis isn't over. And I remember being so blown away by the final image of the play, but then stepping out and saying, this is where the theater begins, right out here, with Larry Kramer still fighting his fight. It was such a powerful testament to his life and his life's work.
Yeah. Leigh, something you said, oh, sorry.
Go right ahead.
Oh, Leigh, something you said earlier resonated with me of this is the first time I saw myself represented. And so I guess that's a question I want to pose to the group is, whether that be your first experience with queer theater or not, when was the first time you truly saw yourself represented, if that's even happened yet?
Well, curiously enough, you're in my head right now. My first professional show was Hair in 1969. But I didn't have an objective experience. It was a subjective experience. That's the first time I actually met myself as a queer individual. Now, you probably know that there is a single queer character in Hair. His name is Wolf. He's the one who sings Sodomy. This is 1967 when it was on off-Broadway, 1968 when it played Broadway, and 1969 when it had its sit-down production in Chicago, which is where I performed it. This is before we were embracing the doctrines of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm probably one of the few Black hippies you'll ever meet, which is why it didn't dawn on me that part of the revolution that we were saying about, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, was also being specifically represented by this one gay character in the play, Wolf. Because then we were talking about changing the face of the world, changing the body politic of the world, changing the way how we actually engage one another through the only power in the universe, which is love. I now understand, 50 years later, that we have just arrived on the threshold of the age of Aquarius, and that an equally powerful pair of activities was the civil rights movement and the let's call it the Stonewall movement. And now with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's the combination of all of those that I think might guarantee the coming of the age of Aquarius, where peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. Because now it's about humanity as opposed to the Black people, the gay people, the Asian people, the indigenous people, the Latinx people. It's about everybody who witnessed that blood sacrifice on the cement of Minneapolis when George Floyd was crucified for our salvation. I'm done for the moment.
And I think I'll just chime in and say, I've done a little reading up on the Aquarian age and what distinguishes, this is off theater subject completely, but what distinguishes the Piscean age, which preceded the Aquarian age. The Piscean age was defined by me, and the Aquarian age is defined by we. And so I just wanted to put a little note on that this is a time of, an expansive time of we.
I think there's a quote, she needed a hero, and that's what she became. I have not had a chance to see myself truly reflected in theater yet. And quite frankly, on screen either, if we're talking in terms of intersections and sort of everything coming together. So I needed that. And as a result of that, I want to be a vessel to take the steps to be that for some other girl that's a child now or a teenager now or in college now, looking for someone that is carving out the kind of a career that she wants to carve out.
Yay. May I respond to that?
Please.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I want to say to Elle Morgan that she is arriving. And we see her in this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic. Not that she is an infection, but she is being used as the mouthpiece for the universe, who says, you haven't learned the lesson yet. So I'm sending a power that's going to stop your foolishness long enough for you to catch up with the misappropriation of your free will. And I really think it may seem a little frivolous, but I really think it's best expressed in a song by the Supremes. The universe, through Mother Nature, is saying, stop in the name of love. Before you break my heart, think it over. And that's what this opportunity is for us, to stop, think it over, appreciate how we're going to move forward, and then to get back to the Piscean age and the Aquarian age. The age before the Aquarian age was totally male, totally tyrannical. The age that's being invited is going to be much more introspective, much more intuitive, much more insightful, much more feminine, capital F, much more maternal, much more about she ruling through love, as opposed to he ruling through power or violence.
Ryan, I see that you were there. I see that. I think you're moved to speak.
Sure. Thank you for, sure. I will agree with Al Morgan that I have not seen myself yet either fully represented as a gay disabled man in the theater, for sure. Some of it's trickling into TV, which is exciting, but even that representation, as close as some people may say that is to my life, just because of fitting certain identity boxes doesn't mean that the story fully resonates with me as an individual. And so I've been carving that path myself as well in predominantly my solo work, and now plays that aren't only solo pieces, but all plays that still have a character of Ryan in them, so that I can provide that representation. But I will also say that if I was to approximate it for myself, you might think that because I'm disabled, it would be about like seeing Ali Stroker win the Tony for Oklahoma, or seeing Madison Ferris in The Glass Menagerie as Laura. It was neither of those things. It was Gideon Glick in Significant Other, the performance for which he was robbed of a Tony nomination. And his being, and as that character, both the writing, but really his performance, I was like, well, this is it. This is the first time that it is, I am the character on the stage. So much so that I went back to see it twice in 48 hours. And some people may not understand how I could see myself there, because he's not a character that's written to be disabled. But my question is, why not? Why couldn't, even though it's on, not every part of me is there, I really felt fully seen by that play. And in my constant quest for love and companionship. And I think that we need to leave space for finding ourselves in work that wasn't necessarily created for us.
Something, Ryan, that really stuck out with me is that is when you said that you had to carve out these places for yourself. And one of the things that really pulled us and moved us to invite you all is that you all have carved out spaces for yourself in which you have made so much impact into people who have been interactive with your work. Like Ryan, I will say I have fallen in love with your solo piece. It was at Joe's Pub when I first saw it, and then seeing you also again at QUEERNESS at last year.
Yeah. Well, because we don't have one. We don't have one this year.
COVID times, yes. And I wonder, and I want to. This is for everyone. But I'm wondering for Leigh in particular, being the head writer of the Laramie Project, and truly has the number of people that I know who were introduced to the Laramie Project and had a transformation in their view of gay, queer people and the humanity. I would love to know more than 20 years later, what has the experience of having written it, but also the impact that is made on others. And yeah, that you've noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, well, many things come to mind in terms of this question of carving out a space. Early on in my directing career, a very prominent director who knew I was a lesbian, who knew I was gay. Lesbian's kind of a little bit of an old-fashioned word, but he said, "Oh, why are there no Tony Awards for? Why will lesbians never win a Tony Award?" He said, "Why will a lesbian never win a Tony Award?" That was the joke, and I was like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Because they don't give Tony Awards for stage managers." And it shocked me, it stunned me, like that, you know, here I was a young director coming up, and to hear that, it made an impression on me. And it's taken a long time for lesbians to make their way on that path to Broadway. And I think that, you know, anyway, that when I was thinking about the question of how do you chip away at the stereotypes, like the stereotype of the lesbian stage manager, okay, like, oh, fine. But it's not funny to say that to a young lesbian director. That makes an impression of you stay in your place. On the contrary, working on Laramie Project, we didn't go to Laramie thinking that we were going to make a play about what happened to Matthew. We went to Laramie with a question. Do we as theater artists have a role to play in the national conversation around what's happening to Matthew Shepard? And it's so interesting that Andre used the word crucifixion, because that was exactly the language that they were using in 1988 when Matthew Shepard was killed, that it was a crucifixion and that Matthew was a martyr. And it was the first time that mainstream America woke up and said, this is wrong, this shouldn't happen. So it was a watershed moment. And as a company, we asked ourselves, like, does the theater have a role to play in this national conversation? So we went to Laramie only with that intention. And again, to this point of carving out a place for yourself as a theater artist to enter the national dialogue about such a pivotal moment in American history. So to see the legacy of Laramie, it's over 20 years later, and it's still performed and it's still done. And, you know, to me, the Laramie Project should feel historical. It should be outdated. It should be a play that people say, that's old news. We don't want to do the Laramie Project. For young people, the Laramie Project still feels urgent and pressing, and like it could happen again at any moment. And that's the great shock when I go to college campuses and interact with students especially, that it feels like it could have been written yesterday. It shocks me each time. But it has, I mean, we didn't mean for it to become an activist theater. You know, we went there and we saw the story and we told the story. And to see young people take it up and use it in an activist way has been one of the great inspirations of my life.
Leigh?
Yes?
One of the reasons the Laramie Project is so powerful and will last for a long, long time is because at the very core of it, I'm speaking from my personal experience of having been in the theater and engaged with it, at its very core, oh boy, is this concept of the body of pain that is common to all humanity. In terms of our evolution as a species, we're in our puberty. All we know is growing pains. And we act on those growing pains based on our own insecurity, projecting them on others, and the most obvious target. That's all I got.
Thank you both for sharing that. And Leigh, like you said, when I think of history and I think of LGBTQ history and theater history, I think of the Laramie Project. I mean, we talked about the first play we saw, but the first play I read that had queer representation was the Laramie Project. And so, but I'm also thinking about what Ryan said about carving your own way into this movement. And so I guess my question for all of you would be, how do you see other people in this, 20 years later after the Laramie Project? What are the ways that we see queer creators now doing this type of work that we're going to be reading, 15 years later in school? Like, who are those players in your mind?
Many of them are happening in smaller theater companies downtown, companies that are not getting the kind of funding that those writers need to actually be heard. There's holding on to hope that funding will come for those projects because many of them are in the beginning stages. But there's also writers like Michael R. Jackson, who is out here putting things out as raw as you can put them for people to hear. And when people like Michael are telling stories that they didn't think would ever get produced, so they were just honest, in turn, the project touches everyone. The project, Andre brought up how universal the feelings behind things can be, and that's what, like, A Strange Loop is a good example of that.
I'd also like to mention Jeremy O. Harris. Do I have his name correctly?
Correct, Andre.
And the queer artists who, just as the Black Lives Matter marchers, protesters, who are fearless, who will shove her hand inside your throat and pull you inside out so that you can see the rot, the decay, the toxic poisoning, the festering wound that we all need to be healed. And it does take a kind of fearlessness, which is why the burden, which in religious exegesis, burden means message. So the message is going to be delivered by those who are most fearless. The younger you are, the less you fear. That's what I'm seeing with the people on the street saying, no, it's over. We're not having this any longer. Yeah.
Thank you. Elle Morgan,
I'd also put a little shout out for Miranda Rose Hall, who is a contemporary of Jeremy O. Harris, graduated alongside him, and her work has not quite skyrocketed to the level of success that his has, but she's one to watch in my estimation.
Cool. Elle Morgan, I have a question specifically for you, and maybe it's just a little more broad, but I guess being a part of this production that really is a voice to one of these new works that's finally bringing, your voice and so many voices to the forefront. Can you just talk a little bit about what that experience for you has been like since the show premiered?
Sure. We worked on the project for many years before. I was on it at least 5 years before we started at Playwrights. So there were, of course, lots of shifts and changes that happened in the show and in me, quite frankly. There was a period in the development process of the show where I became vocal about being trans, and that sort of shifted a lot of how I was being seen in the project. And there was a moment when I was contemplating leaving the show because I wanted to make space for the person that was supposed to be there to tell that story. Because that is very important to me. I can't preach about inclusivity and people being honest if I'm standing in someone else's way of telling a story. So things worked out where the team actually said, no, we've already been talking about you behind your back. We need you to stay, and we want to allow your presence in the show to broaden the scope of what the show does, and allows that many more people to feel seen in the project. And I would say the show speaks truth to my voice, yes, and I do think that it is much more through a gay male lens than it is through my particular lens. I think that my presence in the show was the woman in his head, which every person has, period.
Every person,
period. Yeah. So that was my purpose in the show, and I love the fact that I got to have the moment in the show that gave him hope, that told him to tell your truth, tell your stories truthfully without fear. It was a lyric that I don't believe the universe makes mistakes. And I think that it was something really beautiful for me personally to get to say every night. Because as I was saying it to him, afterwards, I would always sit and go, oh my God, this is also speaking to me every night too. I have to also continue to press forward in being honest and truthful, because without that little girl watching will never see what she's supposed to see. It's always about that little girl watching.
Yay.
Yeah. This is a question for Ryan and also for the entire group. I wanted to start off with Ryan. During the time of COVID and during the time of this revolution, I see a lot of artists trying to look for more intersectional ways of looking into our politics and also continuing to tell our stories. And Ryan, I know you are also working with Diana O this week.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Yes. But it's a show that is being streamed on Mai. If you could tell us the show, Ryan, because I think it's
absolutely. I would be more than happy to do that. It is called My Hate Letter to the Great American Theater, and that's hate with an 8 and great with an 8. I am an alum. I can tell you more. Do you want me to tell you more or not?
Oh, I just wanted to add one more thing. I'm just going to do a plug for you as well. You are also working on Pride Plays. You have your own play in Pride Plays.
Yes.
So yes, if you could tell us a little bit more and also your thoughts on continuing to tell stories, similar to the vein of Elle Morgan saying, you know, there is that person out there who needs to see this.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with Diana because it's live tonight at 8 p.m. If you're interested, and rebroadcast tomorrow at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. on HowlRound. I adore the show. It was developed alongside my now Pride Plays play in the Emerging Writers Group at the Public, and the entire original reading cast from last summer is back on Zoom, which a play in which lots of people who, I can tell you, it's so rare to have the whole, is my Wi-Fi okay? Can you hear what I'm saying? Am I good? Okay.
Now it is.
We all came back, and like, that's so rare that every person from the reading is back a year later. And it's a show about racial justice in the theater, and it is a show about media reparative justice, is to quote directly. I just love it so much, and Diana is such an important voice. And my play in Pride Plays is perhaps the least edgy of anything I've written. It is a family play called Good Time Charlie, about my gay uncle and the parallels of our experiences in the same family, a Lebanese American family in which the play has nothing to do with us being Lebanese American, and also the fact that I am a central character in the play as a disabled person, and the play has truly nothing to do with my being disabled, sometimes to the critique of certain other theater artists who feel they want to impose that upon the work. And I say, well, thank you, but you can go watch any of the other things that I have written, because this is the play that isn't about that. And I should be allowed the space. Also, it's a play about my family. And so in my family, in which I've existed for now 28 years, the disability has long not been a topic of conversation or conflict or plot. So I'm excited to be working on it. I think we've made some big steps for this reading coming up on June 30th. but also there's the world is a different world than it was even 2 or 3 months ago when we were doing the last reading. And my hope is that in all of the sort of work that's going to come out about this current moment, that there still is space for the stories that were being written before, that don't have anything to do with COVID-19, right? Don't have anything to do with the fact that we've been shut down and will have been shut down for 2 years. Because I hope that we'll want to escape that to some extent when we come back, and can just like be happy for a little bit, while also making space for the very important reckoning of Black theater artists that's happening right now, and making space for those stories. And I just don't want to see a play about COVID-19. You know what I'm saying? I really don't want to see that. So that I'm done. I'm rambling now.
It's all good. Thank you so much, Ryan. And right now, we have come to a part where we are receiving questions from our audience. And so let's see. We have a question from Amy Ackerman. This is from Amy. Thinking about carving out space, especially for those of us whose bodies are on the margins, what advice do you have for forging your own way as the theatrical landscape is shifting?
Well, I am not a size 2, so I would consider that my body is not on the margins. So I do think that it is important to just push forward at this point. It's like you've gotta create opportunities for yourself. If you want people to see you in a certain way, you have to be an active part of making them see you that way sometimes. And where there are spaces that are more difficult to get into, you kind of have to just push and keep pushing and keep hoping. At least that's all I can think, because I know that there are things that I've been seen for recently that I could never have thought about being seen for, specifically because I'm like, I'm not a size 2. Are you really like going to let me in the room for this? But I think that there are people, we're hoping that after all of this, that some of the minds will be a little bit more open in terms of who is going to be able to tell what stories, but knowing that this has been so deeply woven into the fabric of our society that it's going to take a whole lot more than just one crazy few months to really get it all out. So there are many of us who have been struggling for many years before this. Black people fighting for visibility is not a new thing for Black people. So this journey will continue and continue and continue. You just have to keep pushing.
May I speak to Amy?
Mm-hmm.
And Amy, I apologize for being so philosophical, but what I'm going to share with you is not only my truth, but the truth. There is no one like you, Amy. There has never been anyone like you, Amy. There shall never be anyone like you, Amy. Therefore, know yourself, be yourself. Authenticity is everything. There is an horizon waiting for you to discover. And if you don't discover it, it will forever be undiscovered. There is a mystery waiting for you to decode. And if you don't decode it, it will remain forever a mystery. There is a treasure waiting for you to uncover. And if you don't uncover it, this treasure will forever be marked by a black X. There is a miracle waiting for you to unfold. And if you don't unfold it, Amy, the miracle will go begging forever.
Is that off the dome?
Yeah.
I know, that was amazing. That was amazing. That was amazing. That was amazing. I love how Andre's in the center here. Like God is speaking to us right now.
I would like to add that when you are carving out your space and telling the story that you want to tell, and making sure that there is no black X, so that your magic can unfold. Please interrogate the kinds of stories that we are told as individual communities are told. What are the stories being told to us about us? And do we necessarily want to reflect that back, or do something more true and more authentic to our real selves? Because sometimes, and I'm speaking specifically from the disabled community, I've seen a lot of work where people are just sort of falling into the narrative that society tells them is their existence, is their worth, is their and sparkle that. And that makes me sad, because it tells me that they have not, that all they have is what they've seen on the stage or on the screen. And there's so much more to us than the stories that have been fed to us by society in the limited narrative. So please break free of that and tell the story that is authentic to you, not necessarily the story you think fits in the box that you're supposed to tell.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to say no.
I know you want to I know you want to jump in.
Oh, wow.
That's other questions, but I just want to say that this is a profession. This is a profession that hurts a lot of the time. It just hurts a lot of the time. Like, there's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of rejection. That's just like part of it, you know? And sometimes I ask myself, like, why did I get involved in a profession that is so hard and so painful a lot of the time? You know, but the truth of the matter is that for me, it's not about getting a certain place in certain institutions. For me, it's about following the thread of my work. It's about following my heart. It's about expressing my creativity. And if I have to do that in unorthodox ways in order to do it, that's what I've been committed to for most of my career. Most of my career has been spent on the margins of the institutions and fighting alongside everybody else to get a place at that table. So Amy, stick with it.
Yeah.
Morgan, can you just say what you were about to say about saying no?
Oh, don't be afraid to say no. I think that it is very easy for us, especially as actors, it's very easy for us to put ourselves in this position where we are sort of just subject to the mercy of whoever will see us, without realizing that we do have power in this too. We've been given gifts. It is also up to us who we share those gifts with. If we can say no to something that is telling a narrative that we don't want to do, you might have to wait tables or temp or do something else in the meantime, or spend time writing on your own until you get, you know, that huge thing. But because you said no, but it's a matter of seeing your self-worth and knowing that I am more than playing the same narrative that everybody has already seen timeless, you know, over and over again. I just think we have to understand that we do have some control over our own paths as well. We have to be willing to say no so that the universe can give us what we want.
Yeah. Sort of thinking about what everyone's been saying about institutions and saying no and seeing the same representation over and over again, I'm gonna refer to a question that we've gotten a few times now, but maybe reframe it a little bit, which is, at what point do we expect the Tonys? But I'm going to say the Tonys and then also institutions and this bigger field that we're in. How do we expect these institutions? Do we expect these institutions to erase the binary that exists in so many ways? Do we expect them to? If so, how do we expect them to at this point in the world that we live in right now?
I mean, there needs to be more material and people who are not part of that binary getting opportunities in order for that to actually push forward. If you were to take the awards, the Antonios are a good example of an award show that is, you know, pushing this idea of not having a binary attached to it. But the reality is, amongst those people nominated, how many people are actually not on the binary? I don't actually think that there are any non-binary people nominated. I'm not sure. But I think that that's part of the thing, is that if you're not actually including the people that you're looking to benefit, that this is supposed to benefit, then it's, why is it happening? I do think it should happen at some point, but we need more opportunities.
The binary is one of the most difficult symbols, actualities to change, because that's all we have ever known. Duality. It's either this or that. When we, particularly those of us who have chosen the profession of the arts, understand that it's everything. It's experiential, and that it's all good. That's why it's so difficult to get beyond this moratorium that we are experiencing right now, because there's resistance to the new earth that we are creating. And the new earth is everything is everything. People can't handle that. And listen to what Leigh said. If you're going to be an artist, your work is always how to liberate, how to be free. And what you're going to experience on a daily basis is rejection and insecurity. Now, don't let that frighten you. This is how you test your mettle. This is how you get the profession that you have chosen to choose you in return. Because you're going to get hungry as an artist, literally and metaphorically. So when you get hungry, make your meal of rejection. You're going to get lonely as an artist, literally and metaphorically. And when you do get lonely, make insecurity your companion. Then you're tough enough to make the changes that you want to see happen. Then you're tough enough to explode the binary. Then you're tough enough to understand that in a field of sunflowers, a rose is a weed. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
I think representation in the rooms where these awards are being put together is also very important. If you're going to take the steps to get rid of the binary, you might want to have people in the room helping the process, people who are not along the binary to do that. So find some non-binary people or some people who are going to be able to help you do it right.
And I just want to have a check right now. We have our last 5 minutes. And
where did the time go?
I know. You know, that's how a Kiki works, you know, Andre.
Not a Kiki.
This has been such a meaningful experience. And I guess one of the things, and also answering a question from Cody Page, who is working on a dissertation about the potential for utopic activism within contemporary queer theater, if we could all share examples of work and to also uplift them by lesbians, trans individuals, non-binary individuals that you think are important at this time. My offer to that is MJ Kaufman. I love MJ's work. If you have not interacted with MJ's work, please do.
I agree on MJ's work, and I'll put a little plug for Haley St. James, who is a young non-binary queer playwright, and who's also, they're also part of Pride Plays. I'll be directing their reading on June 26th, 3 o'clock. But to speak to utopia, I just want to say something about utopia really fast. I know we don't have a lot of time, but Andre brought up Ellen Stewart, and the closest thing to utopia I've ever experienced in my artistic life was La Mama Umbria with Ellen Stewart. And I walked into that place that was built, you know, with her MacArthur Genius Award. She bought a convent and made a place for artists to come. And I walked into that place, and it was the last year that Ellen was well enough to be there. And they kind of brought her down this Italian staircase in a wheelchair, which was very precarious. And I saw her and her face lit up, and she said, "Welcome." And I said, "Ellen, it's so lovely to meet you. I feel like I'm standing in your dream." And she smiled from ear to ear and she said, "You are." And it was that confidence that she exuded, where it was like, I have a dream and I'm doing it, I'm making it, and the artist will come and it's going to be here for them. And I don't know, I think in my mind, Ellen Stewart is as queer as they come.
Yeah, there you go. And
I will plug Preston Max Allen and Shakina Nafak as musical writers and playwrights.
I'm going to throw out Ian Field Stewart, who is the book writer on a new show that's in development now called A Complicated Woman. It's one of the most beautiful books I've read written by a trans person about a trans person's experiences. I have to throw another one in there. Shali Cook and Eamon Boylan are also writers to pay attention to. They're kind of genius and need some funds.
Right. No, yeah.
to develop both their craft as well as the projects that they're working on.
I'd like to offer as director Jaylon Livingston, who's brilliant, unafraid, handsome, and forward-looking. And as a writer, I'd like to offer Kevin R. Free. Okay.
I'm going to plug, because I think recent graduates of playwriting programs need some love right now, my friend Maddie Doppolt, who wrote a play called The Model Play, which is now a podcast because we're in quarantine, but I'm going to plug her.
Well, thank you for this hour. We are at 5:59, and this has been such, as a young queer person of color, and to be in this group and to know that all of your work has affected me and has affected so many people. I thank you for being in this room, Zoom room, and I hopefully one day meet all of you in person. So, but thank you. I thank you to everyone on this panel for your wisdom and your generosity. Thank you to Brandon for interpreting us today.
Stunningly, brilliantly.
Yes. To Bree and National Queer Theater for all of your work on this panel. If you would like to find upcoming programming and join us, go to nytw.org for more information on National Queer Theater and their amazing Criminal Queerness Festival. Visit nationalqueertheater.org and dixonplace.org to sign up for programming. And if you have a chance, please fill out the survey in the chat. We always love to hear how we're doing.
National Queer Theater, I know we're over time, but they're doing such amazing work. And this week in America, we celebrated our Supreme Court decision. And meanwhile, in many, many countries around the world, it is still a crime to be gay. And the work that Adam is doing is amazing.
Yeah, just to echo that and echo everything that Gaven said, so I don't start crying, because I definitely will.
Cry.
Thank you all again so much. And to echo what Leigh said, we're in the midst of our Criminal Queerness Festival right now, which you can find more information about on National Queer Theater's website, and you can register for our events on Dixon Place's website. So we send an invitation to you to do that, and thank you everyone who was here, everyone who watched. It was, I have no words, but thank you all so much.
Thank you for allowing me to spend my Wednesday afternoon promulgating queer power.
Yes.
Happy Pride all. And
happy Pride. Happy Pride. Blessings to all.
Bye.
Thank you all. It's so great to have you inside of my body and my hands.
Yeah, boy, come on.
I love it. I love it.
I'll live inside your body anytime you want.
Live inside my body anytime, Mr. De Shields.
You know it has to come to that.
Love you. I gotta go. We'll keep in contact.
Leaving the meeting.
Leaving the meeting.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.